If you are going to start a podcast with highly intellectual discussions surrounding books and their history, you need an award-winning and critically acclaimed host to do the job right. Unfortunately, we can't afford anyone like that. So here is the only guy we found willing to do the job, Jason Morrison. Grab some coffee or an energy drink and a handful of ibuprofen because it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Welcome back. Have you read this? Books, whatever. Let's just say you finished watching the presidential debates and you thought to yourself, that wasn't sad enough. I need something worse. Well, guess what? You're in luck. Well, maybe. The more that I think about it, the more that I feel like the books that I want to talk about may not actually be as sad as our current political climate. I mean, they're close, but I guess they're probably not exactly equal, unfortunately. There's a ton of these types of lists pretty much anywhere you look. But since you're tuning in here, you have clearly come to the expert. This really is the only list that will matter. I mean, you don't want a website that just collects recommendations solely for the recommendations. You want the real deal from someone who is in the trenches, someone with lived experience. And that, my friends, probably not me, but I've put this together anyway. All right. The first book, A Little Life. And I want to throw this out there. I know what some of you are probably thinking. This book always makes every single one of these lists. And I guess you're probably right about that because I see it everywhere. Anytime that there's some kind of compilation or request for a sad or soul-crushing book, A Little Life, it's always in there somewhere. So much so that I've I've become so familiar with seeing that cover. I don't even need the book title anymore. I know exactly what that is. And if you have read this book, then you can understand why. It's a lot to take in. First of all, it's about 720 pages. That alone might deter some people. But second, the book is just heavy in general. It follows four classmates who have moved from a Massachusetts college to New York. And these guys are just trying to make it in the world, and they're staying close and connected. And of course, every one of them has their own issues, as you would probably expect. But I think just saying this book follows four friends, I don't think that's really enough. You feel as if you're this fifth person in their friend group and that you grew up with these guys and you've felt all of their pain and you've shared all of their successes. I think the character development here is superb. And at times it's just unreal. I don't know how you make it through this one without feeling like you are a part of the story. Part of the synopsis reads, over the decades, their relationships deepen and darken, tinged by addiction, success, and pride. Yet their greatest challenge, each comes to realize, is Jude himself. By midlife, a terrifyingly talented litigator, yet an increasingly broken man. His mind and body scarred by an unspeakable childhood and haunted by what he fears is a degree of trauma that he'll not only be unable to overcome, but that will define his life forever. Basically, this is just a soul-crushing book that is so beautifully written, and it's just terribly tragic. And not that Goodreads is the end-all be-all in terms of what makes a book good or not, but it is holding a 4.3 star rating and has over 700,000 ratings. Sure, there's some idiots out there who really shouldn't have a Goodreads account to begin with, but for a book to have that many reviews and keep that high of a rating, I think it's got to be worth checking out. I'll have to say, I didn't bawl my eyes out at the end of this one, but I really felt crushed and empty. I think that's how this book just leaves pretty much everybody. And I want you to feel the exact same thing. So I think you should read it and let's share the misery together. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes seems to fly under the radar at times, and I'm surprised actually at the number of people who haven't read it or even really heard about it. But then again, I'm also surprised at the number of people that think it's totally okay to be on their speakerphone full volume while they do all of their grocery shopping. So anyway, this novel is told in a journal style from the perspective of the main character, Charlie Gordon. Charlie Gordon was born with a quote-unquote unusually low IQ. He was chosen to participate in an experiment which will increase his intelligence. And this is a procedure which the scientists and those involved have said it's already been successful because they have tested this on a mouse which is named Algernon. And the scientists that follow Algernon, they see this large burst of intelligence, but then it regresses. And so they're worried, will this same thing happen to Charlie once he undergoes this? Now, despite this thing being written in 1966, I was actually surprised at the language in the book used to describe someone affected by disability. I think awareness and care and language, those type of things have come a long way in terms of disability. So I do feel like this was approached with kindness. I was expecting something truly terrible in a way, or at least at the very minimum, horribly insensitive with how the language was used. But I did. I thought it was kind in a lot of ways. The weight and heavy emotions of this story, it really rides on the fact that this is told by Charlie himself from his perspective. So you're reading his journal entries and you're seeing what happens before and after this experiment. And you see how his perspectives change, how people around him changes, how the world he navigates will change along the way. It's just a really powerful read that addresses so much in just 300 pages. And I'll say, just a fair warning, the ending of this broke me. And this was one of the very few books that I can ever really remember bringing me to tears once I was done. All right. Save the best for last, maybe. I don't know if you want to say best. Maybe the most crushing for last. I can't even remember who I was talking to about this book. And they tilted their head at me like a dog, when you're using a word that they don't recognize. Whoever it was, they were shocked that I would be reading a Rebecca Yarros book. And see, look, I've been trying to tell y'all that I read just about everything, but I guess Mr. Dystopian Fiction picks up a romance book and everybody gets confused. But you'll see whenever someone online asks for recommendations of sad books, I can always count on A Little Life to show up somewhere, rightfully so. On one Facebook group that I belong to, The Last Letter was mentioned over and over and over again. The synopsis didn't really give too much away about what this thing is even about. In fact, the only real glimpse you get from what happens appears to be this letter from a guy named Ryan to a guy named Beckett. And that's actually what's on the back of this book. So in this letter, we read that it's a letter from Ryan who did not make it out of the Army alive. We aren't really given any information at this point as to what happened or where, how, anything like that. All we know is that Ryan's last request is for his friend Beckett to get out of the Army and go take care of his sister Ella. And this is Ryan's sister Ella, who is raising twins alone and has no parents or grandparents. It's pretty much all I knew heading into this thing. And I have to be honest, I didn't expect much. I don't read a ton of romance, a big shocker. Given everything that I have seen and I have read, I really thought this was just going to be the typical romance novel junkie crap where people with too many emotions just want to cry for no reason at some plotless book. And I really did fully expect to get to the end of this thing and think, okay, this is another one of those stupid Hallmark movies that none of this kind of crap makes sense. And it was just blah. That's my mindset going into this. And then around page 60, I would say, give or take, I found myself like, I was all in. I was fully invested in this thing. Like I was ready to move there, wherever this place was. And it was at this point, and I remember I set the book down and did something that I rarely do in the middle of reading anything, and I went and looked at some reviews, and I avoided spoilers, and I'm not going to spoil anything here because that sucks, but I wanted a little more insight into how I was feeling and why this book was already so early on being set up to just snatch my heart out of my chest in some violent fashion. And I stumbled across several comments about the book. They were saying that it felt too drawn out. It was too lengthy. It was just overly dramatic, just for the sake of being dramatic. And that's something that I can relate to because I live in a house full of women. But having finished the book, I don't think I would have changed how Rebecca Yarros built the foundation of the emotions in the story. I didn't always realize it while I was reading it, but now I get why she did what she did. And look, y'all, I'm a dystopian fiction guy, okay? I don't read romance often. I prefer zombies, into the world, serial killers, thrillers, those type of things. But Rebecca sat here, she looked me in the eyes and she said, okay, watch this. And how she paced this, I thought it was great. She pushed in certain areas. She mixed in dialogue that made me feel like I was in the room listening to these people talk to each other. It was just so well done. And I would say if you're really, if you're going to want a sad book, if you're going to take this one on, I would avoid all spoilers. And that's why I've been trying to tread carefully here about what I'm saying and what I'm giving away. So avoid spoilers. And then when you get to about page 382, now I know that's pretty specific, but when you get there, I want you to stop. I want you to set the book down. I want you to go for a walk, clear your head, maybe call your mom, have a long talk, go by the store, pick up a box or two of Kleenex, and then cancel whatever plans you have for the remainder of the day so that you can crawl your way through the remainder of this book. I have zero shame admitting to a minimum of 5 minutes of seriously ugly crying at the end of this book. Who knew? Turns out I have normal human emotions after all. But this one, it's just sad. It is beautifully written. I think that there's some of you that will say, I was kind of predicting this. I didn't really see the truly sad stuff coming. And when it got there, it was just like having a sledgehammer hit you. It was all out sadness. And it's going to force you to feel nearly every kind of emotion along the way. Like there is hope, there is happiness, there's sadness, despair, anger. There's all of these things kind of wrapped up. And when it's said and done, I think just like me, you'll be glad that you read this one. And if you've got through this and you thought, well, I listened to all this crap and I don't want to read any of those, or maybe I've already read all of those. First of all, if you've read all of them, congrats that you've made it through those 3. But if you think these suggestions suck, or you've read all of them, or you just want more soul-crushing destruction of every emotion possible, I'm going to drop a few lists that I found online that have some sad book suggestions, and you can add that to your TBR, which of course, you're never going to get around to reading anyway. Until next time.
Please visit HaveYouReadThis.com for more details about this life-altering episode. If continued brain rot is your thing, follow along on Instagram and Facebook. If you are not too overwhelmed by how deeply profound this episode was, leave a 5-star review. If not, it's okay. Not like we poured our hearts and souls into this.